what would you say are the sort of like steps that they need to take, like crawl, walk, run, in order for them to get some sort of motion going?
Yep. Uh, su- Finally, we got someone interested. So, the first thing is we need like the sort of like base ingredients, right? And like those base ingredients are what I mentioned before. We need to have great product marketing in place. And being even more specific, I think a great place for companies to start is number one, if you don't have great case studies, like I think that you should invest some time in creating great case studies and social proof, and that's a really important asset to have that you can then turn into um, a lot of content that drives inbound revenue. The second thing is I think it's important to sit down with the leadership team and agree on like a perspective or point of view that you want to push, right? And ideally that perspective or point of view ties into your core product, right? So once you have these base ingredients, you have some social proof, you have your perspective and point of view, then you can start building up from there, right? And where I would go next is hopefully you're recording all your sales calls. And then what you can do is you can review all your sales calls and you can start building a content roadmap by reviewing like questions that people are asking, reviewing points of like excitement, right? Like when you say a certain thing, what gets people excited and like what makes them perk up. That's another great like form of content to build. So it's questions, objections, and confusion was another thing to look out for in these sales calls, right? So what happened before when I used to review sales calls is that like I would notice like confusion, like, oh, so like what does your product really do, right? Or you say your pitch and it doesn't quite land, and they're like, oh, so what do you actually mean? So I think that if there's confusion, you can also build content around there. So now we have case studies and social proof. We have a strong point of view. We've sit down, we built a content roadmap across like all the important topics that we are guaranteed to resonate with our customers. I think the final like element or ingredient is to think about how you can differentiate and talk about your product and show your product in action, because you can do general education, you can build content around your customers questions and their confusion points, but ultimately the goal is that we need to drive interest in our product and the problems that it solves. So some good ways of doing this is thinking about, okay, like let's look back at our case studies, right? How do we map a feature that we launch to specific outcomes? What features do our customers want to see? Because we're selling software. It's complex, right? It is hard to understand sometimes. So the final like touch on this content strategy is thinking about how can we show the product in action and showing it solving the problems. Um, so I think these are all the base ingredients. These are all really important. And then you take all this information and you package it and think, okay, like how can I, as a solo marketer on a team or as a very lean marketing team, come up with an engine to create content? And one of the best ways to do this, in my opinion, is that there are different formats, but the best one is like finding a recurring theme or recurring content format that you can execute every single week with your eyes closed, that will be valuable to your customers, that will be of interest. And two examples really come to mind. The first is Hockey Stack. They do their reporting platform attribution, helping marketers with data. And one thing they do is like a series on a recurring basis called Can You Dashboard This? Right. And it's just something that they can do like every month, right? They have their account executives sit down and show like, oh yeah, like normally this would take hours, but in Hockey Stack, like here's how you build this dashboard and here's what you can report on and all the business use cases. That's a great example. Another example of a recurring content format that takes these base ingredients and packages it really nicely for content is there's a fintech company called Sardine. And what they do is that their founder, every week, him and his team, because it definitely takes a team to put this together, he goes, hey, actually backtracking, what they solve for their customers is fraud, right? So how can we prevent fraud? How can we improve compliance? And every week he releases a very long text post on LinkedIn called New Fraud Just Dropped. right? So what is the fraud? What is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of how it's executed, right? And then how can you prevent it? And that's an example of a recurring content format that takes all these foundational ingredients and then melds it into one recurring content format. And then at the very end, he can talk about his product, right? He talks about, oh, like this is our approach to solving fraud. You need to use data to solve this to get ahead of it. And here's what makes us, different from other providers, right? But it's insightful to all his potential customers. I find it interesting. I'm not even in fintech, right? And I think that would be like my playbook for companies looking to execute this strategy and build like a consistent stream of content.